Power is a dangerous drug, especially in the hands of someone wearing a badge and carrying a massive chip on their shoulder. A veteran officer thought he caught a suspicious street kid in an ultra-wealthy neighborhood. He wanted to teach the boy a brutal lesson. Instead, he blindly walked into the most devastating karma of his entire life, because he had no idea he had just slapped handcuffs on the governor's only son. Officer Derek Gallagher liked to think of himself as the undisputed king of Cedar Crest Estates. For 15 years, he had patrolled the winding, manicured streets of the state's most affluent zip code. It was a neighborhood of sprawling mansions, iron gates, and old money. Gallagher wasn't wealthy himself. He lived 3 towns over in a modest duplex, but wearing the badge gave him a sense of ownership over the elite enclave. He believed it was his personal duty to keep the riffraff out, a term he used loosely and often with heavy, unspoken prejudices. It was a crisp Tuesday evening in late October. The sun had dipped below the horizon, casting long, shadowy silhouettes through the ancient oak trees. Gallagher was cruising down Hawthorne Drive in his patrol unit, nursing a lukewarm black coffee, when he saw him. Walking down the pristine sidewalk was a young black teenager, no older than 17. The kid was dressed casually but comfortably in a dark gray hooded sweatshirt, premium denim jeans, and a pair of pristine white sneakers. Slung across his shoulder was a heavy leather strap holding a vintage-looking Leica camera. To anyone else, this was just a teenager out for an evening walk, perhaps a photography student taking advantage of the golden hour fading into dusk. To Officer Gallagher, whose mind was deeply conditioned by his own unchecked biases, the teenager was a glaring anomaly. A dark hoodie, walking alone, scoping out houses. Gallagher slowed the cruiser, his tires crunching softly against the fallen autumn leaves. He trailed the boy for a block. The teenager didn't run. He didn't even look nervous. He just kept walking, occasionally lifting the camera to snap a photo of the sprawling architecture or the way the streetlights caught the evening mist. Gallagher hit the flashing blue and red lights. The sudden strobes illuminated the quiet street, painting the surrounding oak trees in harsh, unnatural colors. The teenager stopped, turned around, and calmly watched as Gallagher shifted into park and stepped out of the vehicle, resting his right hand heavily on his duty belt. "Evening," Gallagher barked, his voice carrying the sharp edge of unearned authority. "Hold it right there." The boy, whose name was Leo, didn't flinch. He lowered his camera and offered a polite, if slightly confused, nod. "Good evening, officer. Is there a problem?" "That's what I'm trying to figure out," Gallagher said, closing the distance between them. He looked Leo up and down, his eyes lingering on the expensive camera. "What are you doing walking around here?" "I'm heading home," Leo replied, his voice even and respectful. "Just taking some photos for my AP art portfolio." Gallagher scoffed. It was a short, sharp sound of sheer disbelief. "Heading home. Right. You live in Cedar Crest." "I do," Leo answered simply. "Up on the ridge." The ridge was the highest point in Cedar Crest, home to the largest, most heavily secured estates in the entire county. Gallagher's lip curled into a sneer. "Listen, kid, I know everyone who lives on the ridge. I've patrolled this sector for 15 years. I've never seen you in my life." "We just moved in a few months ago," Leo explained, maintaining his composure. He remembered the strict talks his father had given him about interactions with the police. "Keep your hands visible. Speak clearly. Do not escalate." "My father relocated for work." "Right. Work," Gallagher mocked. He pointed a thick finger at Leo's chest. "Let's see some ID. Now, therefore." Leo patted the front pockets of his jeans, then his back pockets. A brief flash of annoyance crossed his face. I don't have my wallet on me. I only stepped out for a 30-minute walk. My house is just a mile up the road. If you'd like, you can follow me there, and I can show you my identification." "Oh, I bet you'd love that," Gallagher sneered, his adrenaline spiking. In his mind, he had caught a liar red-handed. "Lead me up a dark driveway so you can hop a fence and disappear." "I don't think so." "Take the camera off. Put it on the hood of my car." "Officer, I haven't done anything wrong," Leo said, his tone shifting from polite to firm. "I have a right to walk in my own neighborhood." You don't have a right to lie to a police officer, scope out properties, and walk around with what I'm guessing is a stolen $5,000 camera, Gallagher snapped. Now are you going to comply, or am I going to make you comply? Leo stared at the officer. He wasn't scared, but he was profoundly disgusted. He saw exactly what this was. He carefully lifted the heavy camera strap over his head and placed the Leica gently onto the hood of the police cruiser. Turn around, hands on the hood. Spread your legs, Gallagher ordered. Am I being detained? Leo asked. You're damn right you are, Gallagher barked. He grabbed Leo roughly by the shoulder, spinning him around and slamming him harder than necessary against the cold metal of the cruiser. He kicked Leo's feet apart and patted him down aggressively, finding nothing but a cell phone and a set of house keys. No wallet, but you got keys. Where do these go, kid? Got a getaway car stashed nearby? Gallagher taunted as he unclipped his handcuffs. Those are my house keys, Leo said, wincing slightly as the cold steel cuffs bit into his wrists. Click, click. Officer, my father is going to be incredibly upset about this. Oh, I'm shaking, Gallagher laughed cruelly. He gripped Leo by the cuffs, forcing his arms up slightly to make him stumble forward toward the back door of the cruiser. We'll see how tough your daddy is when he has to come bail you out for loitering and resisting arrest. I didn't resist, Leo pointed out calmly as Gallagher shoved him into the cramped, hard plastic back seat of the patrol car. You didn't comply with my lawful orders, Gallagher lied, slamming the heavy door shut. He walked around to the front, grabbed the Leica camera, and tossed it carelessly onto the passenger seat before getting in. As Gallagher pulled away from the curb, he glanced in the rearview mirror. He expected to see a terrified, crying teenager begging to be let go. Instead, Leo sat perfectly upright in the back, his jaw set, his eyes burning with a quiet, terrifying intelligence. You're making a massive mistake, Leo said quietly through the plexiglass divider. Gallagher just turned up the radio. Save it for the judge, punk. The ride to the Fairview County precinct took less than 15 minutes, but Officer Gallagher used every second of it to gloat. He felt triumphant. Crime was virtually non-existent in Cedar Crest, so bringing in a suspicious individual was Gallagher's way of justifying his salary and asserting his dominance. You kids always think you're so smart, Gallagher practically yelled over the sound of the classic rock station playing on the radio. Coming out to the suburbs, thinking the local cops are soft, thinking you can just blend in. Leo didn't respond. He sat in the dark, watching the streetlights pass by, calculating his next moves. He knew losing his temper would only give Gallagher exactly what he wanted, a reason to add more fabricated charges. The cruiser pulled into the gated back lot of the precinct. Gallagher hauled Leo out of the back seat, practically dragging him up the concrete steps and through the heavy steel double doors into the booking area. The precinct was brightly lit, smelling sharply of stale floor wax, old coffee, and sweat. At the front desk sat Sergeant Tom Jenkins, a heavy-set, gray-haired veteran who was counting down the days to his retirement. Jenkins looked up over his reading glasses as Gallagher marched his captive into the room. What do we have here, Gallagher? Jenkins asked, his voice weary. Looked like a quiet night on the scanner. Caught this one prowling around Hawthorne Drive in Cedar Crest, Gallagher announced loudly, making sure the 3 other officers in the room heard him. He slammed the expensive Leica camera onto the booking counter. No ID, plains he lives on the ridge. Carrying high-end electronics. He was scoping the place out. Jenkins frowned, looking at Leo. Jenkins had been on the force a long time. He knew what a hardened criminal looked like, and he knew what a terrified kid looked like. The teenager standing before him, though handcuffed and physically restrained, looked like neither. The boy stood with perfect posture, his clothes were clean and clearly expensive, and his eyes held a strange, unflinching authority. Name? Jenkins asked, pulling a booking sheet toward him. Leo, the boy said clearly. Leo what? Jenkins prompted, pen hovering. I will give you my full name and statement after I've spoken to my father, Leo said. I believe I am entitled to a phone call. Gallagher let out a booming laugh. Listen to him. Thinks he's a lawyer. Give him the phone, Tom. Let's see if his old man can scrape together the bail money. Jenkins shot Gallagher a warning look. "All right, son. We can do this the hard way or the easy way, but you get your call." Jenkins gestured to a wall-mounted phone at the end of the booking desk. Gallagher unlocked Leo's cuffs, leaving one wrist tethered to the metal rail of the desk. Leo rubbed his bruised wrist, picked up the receiver, and dialed a number from memory. Gallagher leaned against the counter, crossing his arms, a smug smile plastered across his face. A rookie cop, Officer Bradley, walked over holding a mug of coffee. "Good catch, Gallagher," Bradley asked, tentatively eyeing the Leica. "That's a nice camera. You sure he didn't just buy it?" "Kids like that don't buy $5,000 cameras, Brad," Gallagher scoffed loudly, fully intending for Leo to hear. "And they sure don't live on the ridge in Cedar Crest. You gotta have instincts in this job, nipping the problem in the bud." Leo held the phone to his ear. It rang twice before it was answered. "Yes?" A deep, authoritative voice answered on the other end. "Dad, it's Leo," the boy said, his voice dropping slightly, the first hint of vulnerability creeping in. "Leo, where are you? Your mother was expecting you home 20 minutes ago for dinner." The voice was stern, but laced with immediate parental concern. "I'm at the Fairview County Police Precinct," Leo said calmly. There was a dead, chilling silence on the other end of the line. When the voice returned, the temperature in the room seemed to drop through the telephone wire. "Are you hurt?" "I'm fine. A little bruised. An Officer Gallagher arrested me while I was taking photos on Hawthorne Drive. He said I was suspicious." Another beat of silence. "Did they charge you?" "Loitering and resisting arrest, apparently." "Dad, he wouldn't let me explain. He just grabbed me." "Say no more, Leo. Do not answer any questions. Do not sign anything." "I am leaving now." The line clicked dead. Leo hung up the phone. He turned to face Gallagher and Jenkins. "He's coming." "Oh, wonderful," Gallagher clapped his hands together in mock excitement. "Can't wait to meet the patriarch of the crime family. Get him in a holding cell, Tom. I'm going to go start the paperwork." Jenkins uncuffed Leo from the desk and walked him toward the temporary holding cells down the hall. As he closed the iron-barred door, Jenkins lingered for a second. "Look, kid, if you really didn't do anything, it'll get sorted out. But don't make it worse for yourself." "I don't have to make it worse, Sergeant," Leo said quietly, sitting down on the hard metal bench and staring straight ahead. "Officer Gallagher has already done that all by himself." "Oh." Back in the bullpen, Gallagher was pouring himself a fresh cup of coffee, regaling Officer Bradley with exaggerated details of the takedown. He felt invincible. He had protected his streets. He had done his job. He didn't notice Sergeant Jenkins looking up the serial number of the Leica camera in the National Registry. Jenkins typed the numbers in, hit enter, and waited for the database to return a result. He expected to see a flag for stolen property. Instead, the database returned a clean registry. The camera was registered legally, purchased 6 months prior. Jenkins squinted at the screen, reading the name of the registered owner. His blood ran cold. The coffee in his stomach suddenly felt like a brick of lead. He read the name again, wiping his glasses to make sure his tired eyes weren't playing tricks on him. Registered owner Felix Whitmore. Felix Whitmore. The man who had just won the gubernatorial election by a landslide 4 months ago. The man who was currently the sitting governor of the state. The man who was known for his ruthless prosecution record as a former district attorney and his absolute unwavering devotion to his family. "Gallagher," Jenkins said, his voice coming out as a strained, raspy whisper. "Yeah, Tom," Gallagher replied, taking a sip of his coffee. The kid you brought in," Jenkins stammered, his face draining of all color. Did he tell you his last name?" "Refused to give it," Gallagher said proudly. "Classic gang tactic." "Why?" Jenkins slowly turned his monitor around so Gallagher could see the screen. "Because I just ran the serial number on the camera. It belongs to Felix Whitmore." Gallagher furrowed his brow, the name not immediately clicking in his arrogant brain. Whitmore. So what, he stole it from some rich guy named Whitmore. Add grand larceny to the charges. "Derek, you idiot," Jenkins hissed, standing up from his desk, sheer panic setting in. "Felix Whitmore is the governor, and he lives at the new estate on the ridge in Cedar Crest." Gallagher froze. The coffee mug in his hand suddenly felt very heavy. The smug smile melted off his face, replaced by a slack-jawed expression of dawning horror. He looked down the hallway toward the holding cells, then back at the computer screen. He said, "His name was Leo," Gallagher whispered, the reality crashing down on him like a tidal wave. Governor Whitmore had one child, a son. Before Gallagher could even begin to process the catastrophic mistake he had just made, the heavy steel double doors of the precinct didn't just open, they practically exploded inward. The twist had arrived, and Karma was walking right through the front door. The heavy steel double doors of the precinct didn't just open, they were violently shoved apart. Into the sterile, fluorescent-lit booking room walked a man whose face was plastered on billboards, television screens, and newspapers across the entire state. Governor Felix Whitmore was a towering figure, both in physical stature and political influence. He wasn't dressed in his usual tailored campaign suit. He wore a heavy navy wool overcoat thrown hastily over a cashmere sweater and slacks, projecting the raw, unfiltered urgency of a terrified father. He was not alone. Flanking him were two massive, stone-faced, plainclothes state troopers from the Executive Protection Unit. Right behind them, carrying a sleek leather briefcase and looking sharp enough to cut glass, was Jonathan Albright. Albright was a senior partner at Kirkland & Ellis, one of the most ruthless and prestigious corporate law firms in the world, and he served as the Whitmore family's personal legal counsel. The air in the precinct instantly evaporated. The rookie, Officer Bradley, dropped his coffee mug. It shattered against the linoleum floor, hot liquid splashing onto his boots, but nobody moved a muscle. Sergeant Jenkins stood up so fast his chair rolled backward and slammed into the filing cabinets. "Governor Whitmore," Jenkins stammered, his vocal cords tightening in absolute panic. "Sir, please," Governor Whitmore ignored Jenkins entirely. His sharp, predatory gaze swept the room, instantly locking onto the Leica camera sitting next to the booking computer. Then his eyes found Derek Gallagher. Gallagher was frozen, one hand still gripping a half-empty coffee cup, his face the color of wet ash. The arrogant sneer he had worn for the last hour had completely vanished, replaced by the wide-eyed terror of a man watching a train bear down on him while his boots were stuck in the tracks. "Where is my son?" Governor Whitmore's voice wasn't a yell. It was a low, terrifying rumble that vibrated the glass of the dispatch window. It was the voice of a former federal prosecutor who had sent mob bosses to maximum security prisons without breaking a sweat. He's right back here, sir." Jenkins scrambled around the desk, his hands shaking so violently he fumbled with his heavy ring of keys. "I'll get him. Right away." "You will not touch him," Jonathan Albright snapped, stepping forward. His voice clipped through the air like a whip. "You will open the cell and you will step away. Officer, identify yourself." "Sergeant Tom Jenkins, sir," the older cop rasped, rushing down the hall. "And you?" Albright turned his icy gaze to Gallagher. Gallagher swallowed hard. His mouth felt like it was stuffed with cotton. Officer Derek Gallagher." Whitmore slowly walked toward Gallagher, closing the distance until he was mere inches away. The governor was a full head taller. He looked down at the officer, his eyes burning with a cold, controlled fury. "You arrested my son, a 17-year-old boy, walking in his own neighborhood." "Governor, please, it was a misunderstanding," Gallagher bleated, his voice cracking. The bravado of the king of Cedar Crest was entirely gone. He was wearing a dark hoodie. He was taking pictures of houses. "I asked for his ID, and he refused to comply. I was following standard protocol for a suspicious person." "Do not lie to me, Officer Gallagher," Whitmore interrupted softly. "My son knows the law better than you do. He was taking photographs for his advanced placement art portfolio with a camera I bought him for his birthday. A camera you threw onto a booking desk like a piece of stolen contraband." Down the hall, the heavy iron gate clanged open. Leo walked out into the bullpen. He still maintained his perfect posture, but the exhaustion was evident on his face. "Leo," Whitmore breathed, the political titan instantly melting back into a father. He rushed past Gallagher and pulled his son into a tight embrace. "Are you all right? Did they hurt you?" Oh, I'm fine, Dad," Leo said softly, hugging his father back. He pulled away slightly, rolling up the sleeves of his expensive hoodie. The skin around his wrists was violently red, angry purple bruises already beginning to form where Gallagher had intentionally tightened the steel cuffs. Governor Whitmore stared at his son's bruised wrists. A deadly, suffocating silence fell over the room once more. When Whitmore turned back to face Gallagher, the look in the governor's eyes promised absolute, unmitigated destruction. "Mr. Albright," Whitmore said, not taking his eyes off Gallagher. Jonathan Albright already had his smartphone out. The camera flashed brilliantly in the dim room as he documented Leo's injuries from multiple angles. "Already on it, Governor. I have the physical evidence." Doubt. Albright then turned to Sergeant Jenkins, who had backed himself against the wall. "Sergeant, under the authority of the State Attorney General's office, I am issuing an immediate verbal preservation order. You will lock down all dashcam footage from Officer Gallagher's vehicle, the GPS telemetry of his cruiser, the radio dispatch logs, and the surveillance footage from this booking room. If a single second of data goes missing or is corrupted, I will personally see to it that the Department of Justice indicts everyone in this building for spoliation of evidence and obstruction of justice. Do you understand me?" "Yes, sir." "Absolutely, sir," Jenkins nodded frantically. Gallagher felt his knees threatening to buckle. "Governor, listen to me. I'm a 15-year veteran. I have a pristine record. I keep that neighborhood safe. You have to understand what it looks like out there in the dark." "What it looks like?" Whitmore asked, stepping back into Gallagher's personal space. "What did he look like, Derek? Did he look like a burglar? Or did he just look like a black boy who you decided didn't belong in your wealthy little kingdom?" Gallagher opened his mouth, but no words came out. He was completely trapped. "I know exactly who you are, Gallagher," Whitmore said, his voice dropping to a whisper meant only for the disgraced officer. "I know cops like you. You hide behind that badge to inflict your own pathetic insecurities on people you think are powerless. But tonight, you picked the wrong kid." Whitmore gently placed a hand on Leo's shoulder. "Get his camera. We are leaving." Albright stepped forward, picked up the Leica by its heavy strap, and placed it carefully into his briefcase. He then handed a pristine white business card to Sergeant Jenkins. "My office will be in touch with the Chief of Police by 8 a.m. I suggest you tell Officer Gallagher to find himself a very, very good criminal defense attorney. He is going to need it." Without another word, the governor, his son, his lawyer, and his security detail walked out the shattered double doors, leaving the precinct in total, devastating silence. Officer Bradley looked at Gallagher, shaking his head. "You're dead, man," the rookie whispered. "You are totally dead." The next morning, the sun rose over Fairview County, but for Derek Gallagher, the sky might as well have been falling. By 7:30 a.m., Gallagher's captain called him into the office. The chief of police, the mayor, and an internal affairs investigator were already waiting. He was stripped of his badge, his gun, and his radio, and placed on unpaid administrative leave, pending a massive, multi-agency investigation. But losing his job was merely the appetizer. The main course of karma was just beginning to be served. Governor Whitmore did not hold a press conference. He didn't use his son's trauma for political gain. Instead, he unleashed the full, terrifying power of the private legal sector. Jonathan Albright's team at Kirkland & Ellis filed a massive civil rights lawsuit in federal court. They didn't just sue Gallagher, they sued the Fairview County Police Department for failure to train, negligent retention, and violating Title 18 U2. SC. Section 242, deprivation of rights under color of law. During the discovery phase of the lawsuit, Albright's investigators completely dismantled Gallagher's pristine 15-year record. They unearthed 14 previous complaints of excessive force and racial profiling filed against Gallagher by working-class minorities in neighboring towns. For years, the local police union had quietly swept these complaints under the rug, burying them in bureaucratic red tape. But the union could not hide from federal subpoenas. When the dashcam footage of Leo's arrest was legally acquired by the plaintiff's attorneys, it was a death blow. The crystal-clear audio captured Gallagher's mocking tone, his blatant refusal to verify Leo's address, and the sickening sound of Leo being slammed against the cruiser despite being fully compliant. The police union, realizing the radioactive nature of the case and terrified of the governor's wrath, publicly completely disavowed Gallagher. They refused to pay for his legal representation. Forced to drain his life savings, Gallagher had to hire a second-rate defense attorney who specialized in DUI plea deals, not complex federal civil rights litigation. Within 6 months, the Department of Justice Civil Rights Division, spurred by the undeniable evidence brought forth by the civil suit, officially indicted Derek Gallagher. The trial was a massacre. Gallagher tried to take the stand to defend himself, claiming he felt threatened by the teenager. The federal prosecutor simply played the dashcam footage of Leo, calmly asking, "Am I being detained?" while Gallagher violently slammed him onto the hood of the car. The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours. Derek Gallagher was found guilty of felony false imprisonment, battery, and deprivation of civil rights. Because of the felony convictions, his 15-year police pension was completely revoked by the state retirement board. On the day of his sentencing, Gallagher stood in the federal courtroom, looking gaunt, aged, and utterly broken. The judge, a strict constitutionalist appointed a decade prior, stared down at him from the bench. "Mr. Puff Gallagher," the judge spoke, her voice echoing in the cavernous room. "You were given a badge and a gun to protect the public. Instead, you used them to act as an occupying force against people you deemed undesirable. You terrorized a compliant teenager purely out of malice and prejudice. You are a disgrace to the uniform and a danger to a free society." The judge sentenced Derek Gallagher to 48 months in a federal penitentiary, followed by 3 years of supervised release. He was immediately remanded into the custody of the U.S. Marshals. As the handcuffs were clicked around his own wrists, infinitely tighter and colder than the ones he had placed on Leo Gallagher, looked back at the gallery. Sitting in the back row, dressed in a sharp suit and looking completely unfazed, was Leo Whitmore. The teenager didn't gloat. He didn't smile. He just watched calmly as the man who had tried to ruin his life was marched away to a cage. 1 year later, the Fairview County Police Department, buckling under the weight of the civil lawsuit, agreed to a federal consent decree, completely overhauling their training and accountability protocols. The department was cleaned out, and toxic officers who had hidden behind the blue wall of silence were systematically rooted out and fired. As part of the settlement, the Whitmore family requested zero financial compensation for themselves. Instead, they forced the county to establish a massive multi-million-dollar scholarship fund for underprivileged youth in Fairview County. On a red spring evening, the Fairview Museum of Fine Arts hosted its annual youth exhibition. The gallery was packed with the state's elite, politicians, and art critics. In the center of the main hall, drawing the largest crowd, was a photography exhibit by a high school senior heading to Columbia University in the fall. The exhibit was titled "The Illusion of Authority." The centerpiece photograph was a masterpiece of tension and light. It was a shot taken at dusk on Hawthorne Drive. The composition was slightly tilted, capturing the ancient oak trees and manicured lawns of Cedar Crest, but washing over the entire serene landscape, corrupting the peaceful evening with a harsh, blinding, unnatural strobes of blue and red police lights glaring aggressively into the lens. Underneath the photograph, a small, elegant brass plaque bore the name of the artist, Leo Whitmore. It was the very last photo captured on the Leica camera before a corrupt cop made the biggest and final mistake of his miserable career. Karma never misses an address, especially when you abuse your power to target the innocent. If you were satisfied seeing this corrupt officer face the ultimate reality check and lose his badge, hit that like button right now. Share this video to remind everyone that nobody is above the law, and subscribe to our channel for more intense, satisfying stories of real-life justice and instant karma.